Hey guys, tonight we begin with something very relatable. Our journey takes us to the heart of the medieval world, to a structure that is a symbol of both power and of profound, deep-seated fear. We are going to spend a night inside a medieval castle. We will not be exploring the great battles or the grand politics of the age. We will be concerning ourselves with the quieter, more intimate, and often more dangerous reality of life after the sun has set. We will seek to understand how the inhabitants of these great cold stone fortresses simply survived the long, dark, and perilous hours of the night. This is a story of flickering torchlight and of deep, impenetrable shadows. It is a story of heavy, barred gates and of the cold that seeps with a patient and relentless persistence through the very stone itself. There is nothing for you to do but to find your own place of comfort, your own modern fortress against the night. Let the story unfold around you, not as a list of facts, but as a slow, atmospheric immersion. And let the quiet, somber rhythm of this history be your guide into a deep and peaceful rest. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Part 1. The Falling of Night. The Shutting of the Gates. Our journey begins at the edge of the day in the brief, liminal moment of twilight. The sun, a weak, wintry disk, has just slipped below the horizon, painting the western sky in bruised shades of purple and orange. A cold, damp evening mist is beginning to rise from the moat that surrounds the castle walls, and a sense of urgency, a quiet, practiced haste, settles over the entire community. The night is coming, and the castle must be sealed. The signal is a long, mournful blast from a horn, blown by a watchman on the highest tower of the gatehouse. The sound echoes across the surrounding fields and the small, huddled village that lies just outside the walls. It is a warning. It is a summons. It is the final call to all who belong inside to seek the safety of the stone embrace. Imagine you are a peasant working in the fields just beyond the castle. You hear that horn. You drop your tools. You gather your children. You herd your few precious livestock, a cow, a few sheep, and you begin to hurried walk towards the castle gate. You are not the only one. A stream of people and animals is converging on the single fortified entrance. The air is filled with the lowing of cattle, the bleating of sheep, and the quiet, anxious chatter of the villagers. You are entering through the barbican, the outer defense of the gatehouse, a stone-lined corridor with murder holes in the ceiling above, a place designed to trap and to kill an attacking enemy. But for you, it is simply the long, echoing tunnel that leads to safety. The main gate itself is a formidable barrier. It is a massive double door of thick, iron-studded oak. But in front of it is an even more intimidating defense, the portcullis. This is a heavy iron grille, a grid of thick, sharpened metal bars that is currently raised, held in the air by a great, greasy chain. You hurry your family and your animals under its menacing teeth, across the wooden drawbridge that spans the moat, and into the outer bailey, the main courtyard of the castle. And then, behind you, the process of sealing begins. You hear the loud, rhythmic clanking of a windlass, the great man-powered winch in the gatehouse above. The heavy chain begins to play out, and with a slow, grinding and inexorable groan, the great iron portcullis begins its descent. It comes down, foot by foot, its sharpened spikes sinking into the heavy wooden sill at the base of the gate. The sound of its final, shuddering impact, a deep, resonant thud that you feel in your very bones, is the sound of the world being shut out. Then come the gates. The two massive wooden doors are pushed shut by a team of guards. You hear the deep, echoing sound of the great, horizontal drawbar, a timber as thick as a man's chest being dropped into its iron brackets. The castle is now sealed. This daily ritual is the most important moment in the castle's life. It is the moment when the castle transforms from an open, administrative center of a feudal estate into a closed, self-contained, and purely defensive fortress. The psychological impact of this moment is profound. For those who are inside, it is a feeling of immense security and relief. The dangers of the night, the bandits, the wolf packs, the rival lords, the restless spirits of the dead are all on the other side of that gate. You are safe. You are part of the protected community. But it is also a feeling of being trapped. You are now a prisoner, albeit a willing one, within these high stone walls. There is no leaving until the gate is opened again at sunrise. Your world has shrunk for the next 12 to 14 hours to the size of this cold, dark, and crowded fortress. The shutting of the gate is a moment of absolute finality. It is the drawing of a line between the known and the unknown, between the human and the wild, between the living and all the things that haunt the medieval night. The castle has pulled up its drawbridge and has turned its stone back on the world to wait in a state of tense, vigilant, and communal slumber for the morning. The guard on the wall. The great gate is shut. The portcullis is down. The drawbar is in place. But the castle's defense is not a passive thing. The stone walls may be the bones of the fortress, but its eyes and ears are the men who now begin their long, cold vigil on the battlements. This is the Night Watch. Imagine you are one of these men. You are not a knight in shining armor. You are a simple man-at-arms, a professional soldier in the service of the Lord. You are wrapped in a thick, heavy woolen cloak, its hood pulled low over your face. The wool is damp from the evening mist, and it smells of lanolin and of wood smoke. In your hands, you hold a long, heavy spear, its iron tip gleaming faintly in the last of the dying light. You begin your patrol along the allure, the walkway that runs along the top of the castle's curtain wall. The stone beneath your leather-soled boots is cold, damp, and uneven. To your left is the inner courtyard of the castle, the bailey, where the last of the day's activities are winding down. You can see the flickering orange light from the windows of the great hall. You can hear the faint, muffled sound of voices and the barking of the dogs. But your attention is focused to your right, on the world outside the walls. You look out over the crenellations, the distinctive, squared-off teeth of the battlements, which provide you with a sliver of protection as you walk. The world below is falling into a deep and profoundly empty darkness. The small thatched roofs of the village are dark shapes. The fields are a gray, indistinct blur. The great dark mass of the forest on the horizon is a place of absolute, impenetrable blackness. Your eyes, accustomed to the dark, are constantly scanning the landscape. You are not looking for an army. An army cannot approach in secret. You are looking for the small things. You are looking for a single moving shadow that does not belong. You are looking for the faint, distant flicker of a torch in the woods, a sign of a raiding party or a band of outlaws. You are looking for any sign of movement, of threat, of anything that is out of the ordinary. Your ears are even more important. The night is quiet, and sound travels a long way. You are listening for the snap of a twig in the undergrowth below the walls. You are listening for the nervous whinny of a horse. You are listening for the quiet, stealthy sound of a ladder being placed against the stone wall. You are not alone on the wall. At each corner of the castle, there is a watchtower, and a fellow guard is stationed there. Every half hour you will hear his voice, calling out into the darkness, "All is well!" And you will call back, your own voice, a lonely sound in the vast, cold silence. All is well. This is the call and response of the night watch, a way of checking in, of confirming that everyone is still awake, still alert, still alive. From the stone floor and seems to come in on the wind from all directions. You shift your weight from foot to foot. You pull your cloak tighter around you. The cold makes you drowsy, it dulls your senses. To fall asleep on watch is the greatest crime a guard can commit. It is an act of betrayal that could cost the lives of everyone in the castle. And the punishment for it is swift and often fatal. And so you walk back and forth, hour after hour. The night is long, and your only companions are the cold, the wind, and the stars. You are the sleepless eye of the castle. You are the thin, human line between the warm, sleeping world within the walls and the cold, dark, and dangerous world that lies without. Your vigilance is the price of their peace. The last light in the great hall. Let us now descend from the cold, lonely battlements and enter the heart of the castle's domestic and social life, the Great Hall. Earlier in the evening, this vast, high-ceilinged room was a scene of noisy, chaotic, and smoky life. The lord and his family sat at the high table on a raised dais at one end. The knights, the retainers, and the important guests sat at long, rough wooden trestle tables that ran down the length of the hall. The air was thick with the smell of roast meat, of spilled ale, of the dozens of hunting dogs that roamed the floor, snapping up fallen scraps. The sound was a deafening hubbub of conversation, of laughter, of the music of a traveling minstrel. The hall was lit by a huge central fire in an open hearth, its smoke curling up into the high, dark, and soot-blackened rafters, and by dozens of flickering torches and tallow candles that cast a wild, dancing, and uncertain light over the scene. But now the feast is over. The night is growing late, and the great hall is preparing for its own kind of sleep. The lord and his family have retired to their private chambers, their solar, a small, more comfortable room on an upper floor. The important guests have been shown to their own chambers, and now the servants begin the work of shutting down the hall. Imagine the scene. A team of young boys, the pages, are dismantling the great trestle tables. They lift the long, heavy wooden planks off their trestles and lean them against the wall. This clears the central floor of the hall, transforming it from a dining room into a vast, open, and empty space. Other servants are sweeping the floor, but they are not sweeping a clean wooden surface. The floor of the great hall is covered in a thick layer of rushes, dried reeds and grasses that have been spread over the stone flags. This layer of rushes acts as a form of insulation and as a kind of disposable carpet, but by this time of the evening, it is a foul and stinking mess, filled with discarded bones, spilled ale, and the droppings of the dogs. The sweeping is a perfunctory affair, simply pushing the worst of the filth into the corners. The great fire in the central hearth is the last source of significant light and warmth. It is too large and too important to be allowed to go out completely. The servants will bank it for the night. They will push the glowing logs and embers into a tight pile in the center of the hearth, and then they will cover this pile with a thick layer of ash. This is the curfew, from the old French couvre-feu, to cover the fire. The ash insulates the embers, allowing them to smolder slowly and safely through the night, so that the fire can be easily rekindled in the morning. With the fire now covered, the hall is plunged into a deep, echoing gloom. The only light comes from the last few sputtering torches held in iron brackets on the stone walls. A servant will go around with a long pole, and one by one he will extinguish them, plunging each section of the hall into complete darkness. The last light in the great hall is the faint, dull red glow of the embers, breathing softly under their blanket of gray ash. The great, noisy, and vibrant heart of the castle is now quiet. The air still smells of smoke and of old food, but the sounds are gone. There is only the low, mournful sound of the wind finding its way through a crack in the heavy wooden shutters that now cover the high, arched windows. But the hall is not empty. In the shadows, against the walls, on the newly cleared floor, new figures are settling down for the night. These are the lower-ranking servants, the soldiers with no other place to sleep. For them, the floor of the great hall, close to the residual warmth of the great hearth, is their bed. They will wrap themselves in their cloaks, and they will try to find a few hours of rest in the cold, dark, and rat-infested heart of the sleeping castle. The narrow stairs. The great hall is now dark and quiet. The lord and his family have retired for the night, but their journey from the public world of the hall to the private world of their bedchamber is a journey in itself, a vertical passage through the cold, dark, and defensive heart of the castle keep. Imagine you were a member of the lord's household, a lady-in-waiting perhaps, or the lord himself. You are making your way to your sleeping quarters, and your path is the narrow, spiraling stone staircase. This is not the grand, wide, and welcoming staircase of a later palace. This is a purely functional and deeply military piece of architecture. It is built into the thickness of the massive stone walls of the keep, the central fortified tower of the castle. The first thing you notice is the narrowness. The staircase is deliberately built to be only wide enough for one person to pass at a time. This is a defensive measure. It would be almost impossible for a group of attackers to rush up the stairs. They would be forced to advance in single file, making them easy targets for a single defender at the top. The second thing you notice is the direction of the spiral. In most castles, the staircase spirals upwards in a clockwise direction. This too is a defensive design. A right-handed defender coming down the stairs would have his sword arm free to swing on the wide outer part of the spiral. A right-handed attacker coming up the stairs would have his sword arm cramped against the central pillar, the newel. It is a subtle but brilliant piece of architectural design that gives the defender a significant advantage. Your footsteps and the footsteps of those with you are the only sound. They are a loud, clattering, and echoing sound on the stone steps, a sound that seems to be swallowed by the immense, stony silence of the keep. This nightly journey up the narrow stairs is a journey into the most private and the most secure part of the castle. With each upward step, you are moving further away from the dangers of the outside world. You are climbing into the very heart of the fortress. And yet the journey itself is a constant reminder of the ever-present threat of violence that has shaped every stone and every curve of the world you live in. The locking of chambers. You have climbed the last of the narrow, spiraling steps. You have arrived at the upper floor of the keep. This is where the private chambers of the Lord and his family are located, the solar, the wardrobe, and the bedchamber itself. This is the most secure, most private, and most intimate space in the entire castle, and now it must be sealed for the night. The door to the chamber is not a light internal door. It is a heavy, formidable barrier of thick oak planks reinforced with iron straps and studs. It is a door that is designed to withstand the blow of an axe. The process of locking this door is a nightly ritual, an act of profound and symbolic importance. First, the heavy door is pushed shut. It closes with a deep, echoing boom that reverberates through the stone chamber. Then, the real work begins. There might be a large iron lock, for which the lord or his chamberlain has the key. The key itself is a heavy, intricate piece of ironwork. The sound of it turning in the lock is a loud, grinding, and satisfyingly final sound. Clank, clunk. But the primary method of securing the door is the drawbar. This is the same system used on the main gate, but on a smaller scale. A massive horizontal beam of wood is slid from a deep hole in the stone wall across the back of the door and into a corresponding bracket on the other side. This great bar of oak turns the door into an immovable part of the wall itself. With the door now barred, a final sense of security descends upon the chamber. The family is now sealed within their own personal fortress, a box of stone and oak, deep in the heart of the larger fortress of the castle. They are as safe as it is possible for a person to be in the medieval world. The chamber itself is a world away from the smoky, communal squalor of the great hall. It is still cold, it is still damp, but it is a place of relative luxury. The stone walls might be covered with heavy woolen tapestries, which depict scenes of hunting or of biblical stories. These are not just for decoration, they are a crucial layer of insulation against the cold stone, and they help to absorb the echoes, making the room feel quieter and more intimate. The floor is still stone, but it is covered with a thick layer of fresh rushes, mixed with sweet-smelling herbs like lavender and chamomile. There might even be a rare and precious carpet from the East laid down beside the bed. The centerpiece of the room is the great bed. It is a huge four-poster bed, a piece of furniture so large and so valuable that it is often the most expensive item the Lord owns. It is a symbol of his status and his wealth. The four posts support a canopy from which hang thick, heavy curtains of velvet or of embroidered wool. At night, these curtains are drawn shut, creating a small, warm, and private room within a room. It is the final and most intimate of all the castle's layers of defense. Before they get into this bed, the family will perform their final ritual of the night. They will kneel on the cold floor, on a small embroidered cushion, and they will say their nightly prayers. They will commend their souls to God. They will ask for protection from the dangers of the night, from fire, from attack, and from the evil spirits and demons that were believed to be most active in the hours of darkness. The prayer is a final act of surrender, an acknowledgement that even behind all the stone walls, the iron gates, and the great oaken bars, their ultimate safety lies in the hands of a higher power. And with that final whispered amen, they are ready for sleep. Part 2. Fire and Cold. The chill of stone. The gates are shut. The doors are barred. The fires are burning. But inside the medieval castle, there is an enemy that can never be truly defeated. An intruder that cannot be kept out by any wall, no matter how thick. It is the cold, and its most powerful accomplice is the very stone from which the castle is built. Stone is a material of immense strength and permanence. It is the perfect material for building a fortress that can withstand a siege. But it is a terrible material for building a home that is meant to be warm. Stone has a high thermal mass. This means that it takes a very long time to heat up and a very long time to cool down. In the long, cold months of the medieval winter, the massive stone walls of the castle, which can be 10 or 15 feet thick at their base, slowly, inexorably lose all their warmth. They become a vast, solid reservoir of cold. Imagine you are in the Lord's bedchamber, the most comfortable room in the castle. A large fire is burning in the stone fireplace, the one great innovation that separates this room from the smoky great hall. The fire is roaring, its flames leaping up the chimney. You stand close to the fire, and your front is pleasantly, even uncomfortably hot, but your back, which is turned to the room, is cold. You are living in a world of two distinct and competing thermal realities. The heat from the fire radiates out into the room, but as soon as it touches the cold, massive stone walls, it is simply swallowed. The walls are a heat sink, a black hole for warmth. They absorb the heat from the fire, but they never seem to get any warmer themselves. Instead, they continue to radiate their own deep and penetrating cold back into the room.
To touch an interior wall of the castle in the winter is to touch a surface that feels as cold and as damp as a cellar. The moisture in the warm, humid air of the room condenses on these cold surfaces, creating a permanent film of dampness. This dampness makes the cold feel even colder, a wet, clammy chill that gets into your clothes, into your bedding, into your very bones. This is why the tapestries on the walls were so important. They were not just decoration, they were a vital layer of insulation, a fabric barrier that protected the inhabitants from direct contact with the cold, weeping stone. The drafts in a castle are a constant and unavoidable reality. The windows are covered not with glass, but with thin, translucent sheets of horn, or with oiled linen, or simply with heavy wooden shutters. None of these provide a perfect seal. The wind finds its way in around the edges, creating a constant and often icy draft.
The arrow slits, which are essential for defense, are just narrow, open holes in the wall, and they are a primary source of these drafts, whistling with the wind and funneling jets of freezing air into the corridors and the chambers. And the great fireplaces, for all the warmth they provide, are also a major source of cold. To draw the smoke up the chimney, they must also draw a massive amount of air from the room. This creates a powerful, constant draft of cold air, which is pulled in from all those cracks and gaps around the windows and the doors, and sweeps across the floor towards the fire. The result is that no room in a medieval castle is ever truly uniformly warm. It is a world of microclimates. There is a small semicircular bubble of radiant heat around the fire, and then there is the rest of the room, which is a landscape of drafts, of dampness, and of a deep, stony, and inescapable chill. To live in a castle in the winter is to be engaged in a constant strategic battle to find and to occupy the few small pockets of warmth in a world that is dominated by the cold. Rushes on the floor. Let us now turn our attention from the cold walls to the cold floors of the castle. The floor of a great hall or of a lord's chamber was made of great, thick stone flagstones. These stones, laid directly on the earth, were a direct conduit for the profound and enduring cold of the frozen ground. To walk on them, even with soft leather shoes, was a miserable and chilling experience. And so a simple, organic, and constantly evolving layer was placed on top of them. This was the floor covering of rushes. Imagine a servant in the late autumn going down to the marshy wetlands that often surrounded the castle. He is harvesting rushes, long, green, hollow-stemmed plants that grow in abundance in these damp places. He cuts them with a scythe, bundles them up, and brings them back to the castle to dry. This dried hay-like material is then spread in a thick, loose layer across the entire stone floor of the great hall. The first effect is to insulate. The thick, hollow stems of the rushes trap a layer of air, creating a natural, if not particularly efficient barrier between the cold stone and the feet of the inhabitants. It is the difference between standing on a cold tile floor and standing on a thick rug. The second effect is to muffle sound. The stone halls of the castle were vast, echoing, and acoustically harsh spaces. The thick layer of rushes on the floor absorbed the sound, making the hall feel quieter, more intimate, and acoustically pleasant. The clatter of boots, the scrape of a bench, the loud voices, all of it was softened by this organic carpet. But the rushes were far more than just insulation and soundproofing. They were also the castle's primary system of waste disposal. Life in the Great Hall was a messy affair. People ate with their hands and with knives, and they would throw the bones and the scraps of gristle directly onto the floor for the dogs to eat. Ale was spilled. People spat. The dogs themselves, which were a constant presence in the hall, would add their own contributions to the floor.
The rushes were designed to absorb all of this. They were the medieval equivalent of a layer of sawdust on a butcher's shop floor. To try and combat the inevitable smell of this rotting organic mess, sweet-smelling herbs were often mixed in with the rushes. Lavender, chamomile, meadowsweet, and mint would be scattered on the floor, and their fragrant oils would be released as people walked on them. For a short time, the hall might smell pleasantly of a summer meadow. But this pleasant state did not last long. The herbs would be ground into the filth, the rushes would become a damp, sodden, and foul-smelling mat, a perfect breeding ground for fleas, for lice, and for vermin. The solution was not to clean the rushes, but to simply add a new layer on top of the old one. Over the course of a long winter, the floor of the Great Hall would acquire layer upon layer of rushes, of food scraps, of dog filth, and of spilled ale, until the floor level had been raised by several inches. The Dutch scholar Erasmus, visiting England in the 16th century, wrote with disgust of the English habit of leaving the same rushes on the floor for 20 years, creating a thick, black, and putrid foundation of ancient filth.
Only on a rare occasion, perhaps once or twice a year, would there be a great clean. The old rushes would be shoveled out of the hall, a huge, stinking, and archaeological task, and a fresh, new, and sweet-smelling layer would be laid down. As you lie in your own clean and comfortable bed, think of this strange, living, and constantly evolving floor. Imagine the soft, rustling sound of the fresh rushes underfoot, the fragrant smell of the herbs, and then imagine the damp, foul, and vermin-infested reality that lay just beneath the surface. It is a perfect metaphor for the medieval world itself, a place where a thin veneer of chivalry, of beauty, and of piety often rested upon a deep and often ignored foundation of squalor and of brute, physical reality.
The Great Hearth. We have established that the castle was a cold and drafty place, Let us now return to the one source of significant and life-giving heat that made the winter bearable. In the great hall, this was not the elegant enclosed fireplace of the Lord Solar. It was the great open central hearth. Imagine the sheer scale of this fire. It is in the very center of the vast, high-ceilinged hall. It is not a small, contained fire. It is a bonfire, brought indoors. The hearth itself is a wide, shallow, stone-lined pit, perhaps 10 or 15 feet across. And in this pit, a huge fire is burning. The fuel is not small split logs. It is great whole sections of tree trunks, massive logs that take 2 or 3 men to carry and to roll into the fire. These logs are not meant to be burned quickly. They are meant to smolder and to burn slowly for hours, releasing a vast and steady amount of radiant heat. The heat from this fire is immense. To stand close to it is to feel a powerful, almost physical wave of heat that can make your skin prickle and your eyes water. This fire is the sun of the castle's indoor winter world. It is the single gravitational center around which all life in the hall revolves. The social geography of the hall is entirely dictated by one's proximity to this fire. At the top of the hierarchy is the Lord, sitting at his high table on the raised dais. He has his own smaller fireplace in his private solar, but when he is in the hall, his position of honor is the one closest to the warmth. He and his family get the best of the fire's radiant heat.
Next are the knights and the important guests, their long trestle tables arranged as close to the hearth as possible. They too can feel the direct warmth of the flames. But as you move further down the hall, further away from the fire, the world gets colder. The lower-ranking members of the household, the soldiers, the servants, sit at tables that are in the colder, draftier parts of the hall. They are in the penumbra of the fire's warmth, able to see its cheerful light, but to feel very little of its physical heat. And at the very bottom of this thermal hierarchy are the people who are not at the tables at all. The humble servants, the kitchen boys, the dog handlers. They shiver in the deep shadows at the far end of the hall near the great drafty main doors. For them, the fire is a distant, taunting symbol of a comfort they can see but cannot share. The great hearth is also the hall's only source of significant light. The torches and the candles on the walls provide only a dim, flickering, and local illumination. It is the fire that fills the vast, smoky space with a warm, living, and orange glow. It is a light that is constantly moving, that makes the shadows leap and dance. A light that is perfect for storytelling, for creating an atmosphere of mystery and of magic. But this great fire comes at a cost. There is no chimney. The smoke, thick, greasy, and full of soot, simply rises into the high, vaulted ceiling of the hall. It is meant to find its way out through a small, louvered opening in the roof, a smoke hole. But this is an incredibly inefficient system. The upper reaches of the hall are permanently filled with a thick, acrid cloud of smoke. The great timbered rafters are coated with a thick, black, and sticky layer of creosote. The air in the hall is a constant irritant to the eyes and to the lungs. To live in the great hall is to be slowly and gently smoked, like a piece of meat. So, the great hearth is a paradox. It is a source of life-giving warmth, of community, of light, and of cheer. But it is also a source of a rigid social hierarchy, of smoke, of soot, and of chronic respiratory illness. It is the perfect, flawed, and absolutely essential heart of the medieval castle, sleeping by the embers. The great feast in the hall is over. The lord and his family have retired to their curtained, four-poster beds. But for the vast majority of the castle's inhabitants, the night is not a time of comfort or of privacy. For the dozens or even hundreds of lower-ranking servants, soldiers, and retainers, their bed for the night is the floor of the very hall where they have just eaten, and their only source of warmth is the dying breath of the great central fire. Imagine the scene as the last of the torches are extinguished. The great hall is now a vast, dark, and cavernous space filled with the sleeping forms of dozens of people. The trestle tables have been cleared away, and the floor is a communal dormitory. People do not have individual beds. They have a designated space on the rush-covered floor. They sleep in the clothes they have worn all day, perhaps removing only their shoes. Their only blanket is their own thick woolen cloak. The most prized sleeping spots are, of course, those that are closest to the central hearth. Here, the great fire has been banked for the night, covered in a thick layer of ash to keep the embers glowing until morning. This bed of embers still radiates a gentle, steady, and life-giving warmth. To get a spot close to the hearth is a matter of status. The more important retainers, the trusted sergeants of the guard, will claim the inner circle. They will arrange their sleeping pallets of straw or bracken as close to the embers as they dare, jockeying for the best position.
They will sleep in a circle, with their feet pointing towards the fire, just as their distant, teepee-dwelling ancestors did. This is the most efficient way to share the warmth. They sleep huddled close together, their bodies a collective breathing mass, sharing their own meager body heat. For those who are lower down in the pecking order, the stable boys, the kitchen scullions, the lowest-ranking soldiers, their sleeping spots are further away, in the colder, draftier regions of the hall. They are in the thermal outer darkness. They will try to find a sheltered spot against a wall or under a tapestry to escape the worst of the drafts. They will often sleep with the castle's dogs, the great shaggy wolfhounds and mastiffs, whose warm, furry bodies are a welcome and living source of heat. Sleep in this environment is shallow and constantly interrupted. The floor is hard. The rushes are lumpy and often damp. The air is cold, and the room is full of noise. The sound of dozens of people snoring, coughing, and turning in their sleep. The scuttling sound of the rats, which are a bold and constant presence in the hall at night, foraging for the scraps of the feast.
And there is the ever-present risk from the fire itself. The embers, sleeping under their blanket of ash, are generally safe. But a sudden gust of wind down the smoke hole, or a restless sleeper kicking a log in their sleep, could cause a spark to fly out and to land on the dry, flammable rushes. The threat of a fire in this crowded, wooden-roofed hall is a constant, low-level fear. To sleep by the embers is to exist in a state of suspended animation. It is not a deep, restorative, or peaceful rest. It is a simple, biological necessity. A few hours of unconsciousness snatched in a cold, uncomfortable, and semi-public space. It is a stark reminder of the immense gulf between the life of the Lord in his curtained bed and the life of the common man, whose only comfort is the last, faint, and dying warmth of a shared and public fire.
The chamber pot. In the cold, dark, and perilous world of the medieval castle, the night, even the most basic of human bodily functions, becomes a complex and often unpleasant ordeal. The simple modern convenience of an indoor toilet was a luxury almost unimaginable. And so, the castle had to find other ways to deal with the needs of the night. The primary tool for this was the humble and ubiquitous chamber pot. Let us first consider the castle's official sanitation system, the garderobe. This was the medieval version of a toilet. It was a small, stone-built room or closet,
built into the thickness of the outer wall of the castle. Inside was a simple wooden bench with a hole in it. This hole opened directly onto a vertical shaft that led down the outside of the castle wall. The waste would simply fall down the side of the castle and into the moat below. The name garde-robe is a French word that means to guard the robes. This is because people would often hang their clothes in the garde-robe shaft, as the ammonia fumes from the decomposing waste were a powerful and effective moth repellent. During the day, the garde-robe was a functional, if not particularly pleasant facility. But at night, it was a different matter. Imagine you were in the Lord's bedchamber in the middle of a cold winter night. You were woken by a call of nature. To get to the garde-robe, you must first get out of your warm, curtained bed. You must cross the cold stone floor of your chamber. You must unbar the heavy oak door. You must then make your way with a candle or a torch down a dark, cold, and drafty stone corridor to the small closet-like room that houses the toilet. The garde-robe itself is a freezing, wind-swept place. The vertical shaft that is open to the outside acts as a perfect chimney, funneling the icy winter wind directly up into the small room. To sit on the cold wooden seat in the middle of the night is an act of extreme and miserable endurance. And for the servants and the soldiers sleeping on the floor of the great hall, the journey to the garde-robe was even more perilous. They would have to cross the dark, rat-infested hall, navigate the winding stairs, and find their way to a communal garde-robe that was likely even filthier and more unpleasant than the Lord's private one. It is no surprise, then, that for most people, the journey to the garde-robe at night was a journey they would do anything to avoid. And so they relied on the chamber pot. This was a simple, portable toilet, a wide-mouthed pot made of earthenware, pewter, or even silver for the very wealthy. It was kept in the corner of the bedchamber, often discreetly hidden in a small wooden cabinet called a commode.
At night, if the need arose, you would simply use the pot, right there in your own room. It was convenient, it was private, and it did not require a journey into the freezing cold. But the chamber pot had its own significant disadvantages. The primary one, of course, was the smell. A pot filled with human waste, sitting in a sealed, unventilated room for the rest of the night, would quickly become a potent source of unpleasant odors. And then there was the problem of disposal. In the morning, it was the job of one of the lowest-ranking servants, the gong farmer or the chambermaid, to perform the grim task of emptying all of the chamber pots from the household. They would carry the heavy, sloshing pots down the stairs and out into the courtyard. The contents would then be unceremoniously dumped either into the moat or into a designated cesspit in a corner of the bailey. The cry of "Gardez-le," from the French "Gardez-l'eau," watch out for the water, which was a common warning in medieval cities before a pot was emptied from an upper-story window, was a sound that was likely also heard in the castle courtyard. The chamber pot is a small, humble, and often overlooked object, but it tells us a great deal about the reality of medieval life. It tells us of a world that was cold, that was dark, and that was filled with smells and a level of filth that we can barely comprehend. It is a stark reminder that even for the lord and lady of the castle, life was a constant and often losing battle against the simple, messy, and unavoidable realities of the human body. Part 3. Fear and Defense. The Watchdogs. The walls are manned. The gates are barred. The lord is locked in his chamber. But the castle has another, more primal and more ancient line of defense. It is a living, breathing, and four-legged security system. It is the pack of great watchdogs. As the last of the servants settle down for the night on the floor of the great hall, the castle's dog handler will unchain the hounds. These are not the small, companionable pets we might know. These are large, powerful, and semi-feral working animals, bred for their size, their ferocity, and their loyalty to their master. They are the mastiffs, the wolfhounds, the alants, the heavy-duty security dogs of the medieval world. Imagine the scene in the outer bailey, the great open courtyard of the castle, now lit only by the cold white light of the moon. The great dogs are released. They are a pack of dark, muscular shapes moving with a silent, confident menace. They do not bark. They patrol. Their senses are a powerful extension of the human guards on the walls. Their hearing is far more acute. They can hear the faint, stealthy sound of a footstep in the dry leaves outside the walls, a sound that a human guard might miss. Their sense of smell is a miracle. They can smell a stranger, a person who does not belong, from 100 yards away. They know the scent of every person and every animal that lives within the castle walls, and any scent that is unfamiliar is an immediate cause for alarm. These dogs are the castle's early warning system. Long before a human guard might see a threat, the dogs will have detected it.
The first sign of their alarm is not a bark, but a low, deep, and menacing growl that seems to rumble up from the very depths of their chests. It is a sound of pure, controlled aggression, a sound that is designed to freeze the blood of any intruder. If the threat continues, this growl will erupt into a furious, deafening chorus of barking, a sound that will wake every sleeping soul in the castle and send the men-at-arms rushing to the walls. The dogs are also a formidable physical deterrent. An intruder who managed to get over the outer wall would not find an empty courtyard. They would find themselves face to face with a pack of a dozen or more large, powerful dogs, bred and trained to attack and to kill. To face these dogs would be a terrifying and likely fatal experience. During the day, these same dogs are used for hunting. They are the Lord's prized boarhounds and wolfhounds, essential partners in the chase. But at night, their role shifts from the hunter to the guardian. Their relationship with the human inhabitants of the castle is a complex one. They are loyal to their master, the Lord, and to their handler. They are tolerant of the other members of the household, but they are not pets. They are not to be trifled with. A stranger, or even a familiar face acting in a suspicious way, could provoke their aggression.
The low growl of the watchdogs in the courtyard is one of the constant background sounds of the castle night. For the inhabitants, it is a deeply reassuring sound. It is the sound of their sleepless, four-legged guardians patrolling the darkness, keeping the unseen dangers at bay. It is a primal and a powerful comfort. As you lie in your own bed, perhaps with your own, much smaller and more domesticated dog sleeping peacefully at your feet, think of these great, silent, and formidable beasts of the medieval night. Imagine their dark shapes moving like shadows through the moonlit courtyard. Hear their low, rumbling growl, a sound of absolute, unwavering, and protective loyalty. Let the thought of these powerful and faithful guardians be a comfort, a symbol of the deep and ancient bond between humans and dogs, a bond that has helped to keep us safe through the longest and the darkest of nights.
The bell at midnight. The night in the castle is a time of deep but rarely unbroken quiet. The silence is a fragile thing, a thin sheet of ice over a deep and potentially chaotic lake. And the sound that is most likely to shatter that silence, to jolt the entire castle from its restless slumber into a state of sudden, heart-pounding panic, is the sound of the alarm bell. Every castle had a bell, housed in the highest tower, the donjon or the chapel steeple. Its primary purpose was to mark the hours of prayer for the castle's chapel, the canonical hours that gave a sacred rhythm to the day. But at night,
The bell had another, more urgent and more terrifying purpose. It was the castle's panic button, its universal signal of extreme danger. Imagine you are asleep in the deep, cold, and coffined darkness of the Great Hall. You are lost in a dream, and then you are ripped from that dream by a sound that is both deafeningly loud and terrifyingly urgent. It is the sound of the bell, but it is not being rung in the slow, measured, and rhythmic way of the daily prayers. It is being rung frantically, a wild, chaotic, and continuous clanging, a sound that speaks of pure, unadulterated emergency. In an instant, the entire castle is awake, and in that first disoriented moment of consciousness, a single, terrifying question is in everyone's mind. What does it mean? The bell at midnight can only mean one of two things, and both are a catastrophe.
The first possibility is fire. As we have seen, fire was a constant and dreaded threat. A fire in the kitchens, in the stables, in the wooden structures of the inner bailey. Any of these could quickly grow into an inferno that could consume the entire castle. The frantic ringing of the bell is the signal for every able-bodied person to grab a bucket, to form a line to the well, and to begin the desperate and often hopeless battle against the flames. The second, and even more terrifying possibility, is attack. The bell means that the watchmen on the walls have spotted an enemy. It means that the castle is under siege, that an army is outside the walls, that the ladders are being raised, that the battering ram is being brought forward. The sound of the bell is a call to arms. The sleeping soldiers in the hall and in the barracks will leap from their beds. In the dark, and in a state of frantic, adrenaline-fueled haste, they must find their equipment. They must strap on their leather jacks or their chainmail hauberks. They must find their helmets, their swords, their shields. The castle, which was a sleeping domestic space a moment ago, is transformed into a frantic military machine. The air is filled with the sounds of shouting, of men running, of the clatter of weapons and armor on the stone floors. The soldiers will rush to their designated posts on the battlements, their eyes straining to see the enemy in the darkness, their hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and of battle lust. The non-combatants, the women, the children, the servants, will huddle in the safest place they can find, in the cellar of the keep or in the stone-vaulted chapel. They can do nothing but listen to the terrifying sounds from outside, the roar of the fire, the shouts of the attackers, the screams of the wounded, and pray. The midnight bell is the sound of chaos unleashed. It is the sound of the castle's worst nightmare come to life. It is the shattering of the fragile peace of the night and the beginning of a brutal, desperate, and uncertain struggle for survival. As you lie in your own quiet and peaceful bed, let the thought of this terrible, jarring sound be a stark contrast to the silence that surrounds you. Be grateful for a world where the night is not a time of sudden, violent alarm. Let the peace of your own night be a deep and a comforting one, a peace that the inhabitants of the medieval castle could only have dreamed of. Intrigue in the dark. The most obvious dangers of the castle night came from the outside, from the raider, the besieging army, the wolf. But the thick stone walls of the castle also contained a different, more subtle, and often more deadly kind of threat. The castle was not just a fortress. It was a hotbed of political intrigue, of family rivalries, and of personal ambition. And the long, dark hours of the night were the perfect cloak for the quiet, creeping work of betrayal. The castle was a closed, hierarchical, and often claustrophobic world. 100 or more people
from the lord and his family down to the lowest kitchen scullion, lived in close and constant proximity. This was a world of rigid social rules, but it was also a world of simmering resentments, of hidden jealousies, and of secret, forbidden desires. Imagine the castle as a chessboard. The lord is the king, but his position is not always secure. He might have a younger brother who believes that he would be a better and a stronger ruler. He might have a powerful vassal, a knight who commands the loyalty of many of the men-at-arms and who is growing tired of taking orders. He might have a wife who is engaged in a secret affair with one of those knights.
The night is the time when these hidden tensions can play out. The darkness of the corridors, the silence of the sleeping household provide the perfect cover for the conspirator. Imagine a shadowy figure moving silently down a torchlit corridor. It is the Lord's younger brother. He is on his way to a secret meeting with a disgruntled captain of the guard. They will meet in a quiet corner of the chapel or in an empty storeroom. They will speak in low, urgent whispers. A plan is being hatched. A handful of gold coins, the promise of land and of power, is exchanged for a promise of betrayal. The captain of the guard will ensure that a small secondary gate, a postern, is left unlocked on a certain night. Or imagine a servant, a person who is invisible, who is ignored, but who sees and hears everything. He is carrying a cup of wine to the Lord's chamber, but he has been paid by the Lord's enemies, and the wine is poisoned. His silent, unobtrusive entry into the Lord's private chamber is the moment when the fate of the entire castle is decided. The castle's very architecture, which was designed for defense against an external enemy, is also perfectly designed for this kind of internal intrigue. The winding, narrow staircases, the thick walls with their hidden passages, the dark, forgotten cellars, these are all a conspirator's dream. The fear of this kind of betrayal was a constant and corrosive presence in the mind of any medieval lord. He did not just fear the enemy outside his walls, he feared the enemy within his own household. This is why he had a personal bodyguard, a group of men whose loyalty was supposed to be absolute. It is why he would often have a food taster to check his meals for poison. And it is why the locking and the barring of his own bedchamber door was such an important and a deadly serious ritual. The night in the castle was not just a time of physical danger, it was a time of deep psychological paranoia. Every shadow in a corridor could be a potential assassin. Every whispered conversation could be a potential plot. The Lord, lying in his great curtained bed, had to wonder, is the guard outside my door truly loyal? Is the cup of wine my servant just brought me safe to drink? The castle was a snake pit, and the snakes were at their most active and most venomous in the dark. The dungeon below. Let us now descend from the high paranoid chambers of the Lord, down the winding stairs, past the great hall, and down further still into the cold, dark, and forgotten belly of the castle. We are going to a place that existed beneath the sleeping world of the household, a place of profound and hopeless misery. We are going to the dungeon. The word dungeon comes from the French donjon, which originally just meant the great tower or the keep of the castle. The dungeons were the lowest, most secure, and most inaccessible rooms in this tower, at or below ground level. They were not originally designed as prisons, but as storerooms for the castle's most precious supplies, the grain, the wine, the salt. But their very security made them the perfect place to keep another kind of valuable and dangerous commodity, prisoners. Imagine the journey down. The last of the torchlight from the upper floors has faded. The air grows colder, damper. It smells of wet earth, of mildew, and of human despair. The stairs become steeper, narrower, and more treacherous. The final door is not the fine carved oak of the Lord's chamber, but a low, heavy, iron-bound door with a small, barred grate. The guard unbolts it, and you are pushed inside. The door slams shut, its sound a final, echoing boom of absolute finality, and you are in the dungeon. The darkness is absolute. It is a thick, tangible, and suffocating blackness, a darkness that has never been touched by the sun. The only sound is the slow, rhythmic, and maddening drip, drip, drip of water, seeping through the stone walls and ceiling, and the faint, scuttling sound of rats, your only companions in this miserable place. The floor is not stone. It is a cold, slimy, and stinking mud, mixed with the rotting straw and the filth of previous prisoners. The air is so foul, so thick with the smell of damp, of excrement, and of decay, that it is difficult to breathe. You are not alone. There may be other prisoners here, their presence known to you only by the sound of their ragged breathing, their quiet moans of pain, or the clanking of their chains. For the prisoners in the dungeon are often chained. A heavy iron manacle is locked around your ankle, and the chain is bolted to a great iron ring in the wall. You have only a few feet of movement. You can stand. You can sit. You can lie down in the cold, wet mud, but you cannot escape. The prisoner in the dungeon is a person who has been deliberately forgotten by the world above. They are an enemy knight, captured in battle, being held for a ransom that may never come. They are a political rival of the Lord, a threat that has been neutralized. They are a common poacher, caught hunting the Lord's deer, and left here to rot as an example to others. Once a day, a guard will open the grate in the door and will pass you your food. It is a piece of hard, moldy bread and a cup of stagnant, foul-tasting water, just enough to keep you alive. Time in the dungeon ceases to have any meaning. There is no day, no night. There is only the endless, undifferentiated, and soul-crushing darkness. Your mind, starved of all sensory input, can begin to play tricks on you. You see strange shapes in the darkness. You hear voices that are not there. The line between sanity and madness begins to blur. While the Lord and his family sleep, just a few dozen feet above, in their curtained, feather-stuffed bed, you are here, in this cold, dark, and hopeless world. The castle is a place of layers, a great stone hierarchy, and the dungeon is its absolute and forgotten foundation. It is the place where the Lord's power is at its most raw, its most absolute, and its most cruel. It is the silent, suffering, and unseen heart of the medieval knight.
The arrow slits draft. Let us now ascend from the hopeless darkness of the dungeon and return to the main living quarters of the castle. We have spoken of the pervasive, stony chill of the great stone walls, but this cold did not just radiate, it flowed. The castle was a structure that was designed to be pierced, and every one of these piercings was a source of a constant and often freezing draft of wind. The most numerous and the most distinctive of these openings were the arrow slits. These were the narrow vertical windows, the meurtrières, that were a primary feature of the castle's defensive system. From the outside, they are just a thin, dark slit in the vast, blank face of the stone wall, a difficult target for an enemy archer. But on the inside, the opening splays out, creating a wide alcove that gives the defending archer a broad field of fire. These arrow slits were a brilliant piece of military design, but they were a terrible piece of domestic design. They were, in essence, just a hole in the wall, and they were a permanent, open invitation to the wind. Imagine you are in a small chamber, high up in one of the castle's towers. This might be the sleeping quarters for a group of the Lord's men-at-arms. A small fire is burning in a corner fireplace, but the room is still bitterly cold, and the primary reason for this is the arrow slit in the outer wall.
A constant and often surprisingly powerful jet of freezing air is pouring through this narrow opening. It is a focused, concentrated stream of the winter's cold. You can see it. If you hold a candle near the opening, the flame will be bent almost horizontal by the force of the draft. You can hear it. It is a low, constant, and mournful whistling sound, the sound of the wind being forced through a small, stone-lined channel. To sit or to sleep anywhere near this arrow slit is to be in a state of constant, miserable chill. The inhabitants of the room will do what they can to block it. They might stuff a bundle of rags or a piece of sheepskin into the opening. But this is a difficult compromise. To block the draft is to also block the only source of natural light in the room, and it is to block the defensive function of the opening. The arrow slit is a perfect symbol of the fundamental conflict at the heart of the medieval castle. It is a structure that is trying to be two contradictory things at once. It is trying to be a fortress, a machine for war, and it is trying to be a home, a place of domestic comfort. And in the end, it does neither of these things perfectly. Its defensive features make it a miserable place to live, and its domestic needs create weaknesses in its defenses. The draft from the arrow slit is also a source of psychological unease. The opening is not just a conduit for the cold, it is an eye. It is a connection to the dark and potentially hostile world outside.
As you lie in your bed at night, you are aware of this small, dark opening in the wall of your room. You know that it looks out into the blackness, and you cannot shake the feeling that something or someone might be looking in. The same opening that allows you to watch for an enemy also allows the enemy, real or imagined, to watch you. The sound of the wind whistling through the arrow slit is not just a neutral sound. It begins to sound like a voice, a whisper, a moan. The folk tales of the time were full of stories of evil spirits who could enter a home through the smallest of openings. The arrow slit is a constant physical reminder of the world's vulnerability, of the thinness of the stone veil that separates the safe human world inside from the wild, dangerous, and spirit-haunted world that lies just on the other side.
Part 4. Food, Drink, and Rest. Ale before sleep. Narrative. The night is late. The final prayers have been said. The Lord and his family are in their great curtained bed. And now, a final small ritual is performed. A ritual designed to dull the senses, to warm the body, and to invite a sleep that is often reluctant to come. A servant brings a small silver goblet to the bedside. It is filled with a warm, spiced, and potent drink. This is the nightcap. In the medieval world, the most common form of nightcap was not a spirit, but a strong ale or a wine, heated and mulled with precious spices. Imagine the drink. It is a dark, strong ale brewed with a great deal of malted barley. It is heated over a brazier of hot coals in the chamber. Into the warm ale are stirred the spices that are the ultimate luxury of the age. Spices that have traveled for thousands of miles along the dangerous Silk Road from the mysterious East. A stick of cinnamon, a few precious cloves, a grating of nutmeg, and a spoonful of honey to sweeten it.
The air in the cold bedchamber is filled with the rich, warm, and exotic aroma of the spices. It is a smell of immense comfort and of great wealth. The lord and his lady will sip this warm, sweet, and potent drink as they lie in their bed under their heavy fur blankets. The effect is immediate and profound.
Ale was a fundamental part of the medieval diet. It was a primary source of calories, and it was often safer to drink than the water, which was frequently contaminated. A person in the Middle Ages would drink an astonishing amount of ale, often a gallon or more a day. But the nightcap was a special drink. It was a medicine. It was a sleeping draught. It was a ritual that marked the final transition from the waking world to the sleeping one. It was a way of using a gentle, artificial warmth to trick the body into a state of relaxation, to prepare it for the long, cold, and often difficult journey through the night. As you lie in your own bed, in a state of natural drowsiness, think of this older, more deliberate, and more chemical approach to sleep. Imagine the warm, heavy, and sweet spiced liquid. Feel its imagined warmth spreading through your body. Feel the gentle, relaxing haze that it brings to the mind. The world is soft, the fears are distant, and sleep, which was once a distant shore, is now close and welcoming.
The bread and cheese leftovers. The lord and lady have had their spiced ale, but for the lower-ranking inhabitants of the castle, the night is not a time of such luxury. For the servant sleeping on the floor of the great hall, or the guard on the cold battlements, the night is often a time of gnawing, low-level hunger. And the only comfort to be found is in the simple, humble, and often stolen leftovers of the day. The great feast in the hall is over. The trestle tables have been cleared, but they have not been cleared with the hygienic efficiency of a modern kitchen. The clearing is a hasty and a perfunctory affair, and there are always leftovers. On the high table, where the lord and his family sat, there might be the remains of the fine white wheaten bread, the manchet, that was served only to them. There might be a piece of a meat pie, or the carcass of a roasted chicken. These leftovers are not for the servants. They will be collected and given as alms to the poor at the castle gate in the morning, a public display of the Lord's Christian charity. But on the long, rough tables of the lower hall, the leftovers are of a different kind. Here, the bread was the coarse, dark barley bread, the maslin. The meat was the boiled, gristly end cuts of the beef or the pork. And these leftovers are fair game.
Imagine a kitchen boy, his stomach aching with a hunger that the evening meal of pottage did not satisfy. He is one of the last to leave the darkening hall, and his eyes are sharp. He spots a half-eaten loaf of the dark bread left on a bench. He looks around. No one is watching. With a quick, practiced movement, he grabs the loaf and hides it in the folds of his tunic. Later, in the deep of the night, huddled in his sleeping spot under a staircase, he will pull out his prize. The bread is stale. It is hard. It is probably dirty from where it fell on the rush-covered floor, but to him it is a feast. He will gnaw on it slowly, in the darkness, the rough texture and the sour taste filling his mouth. It is a small, secret, deeply satisfying act of defiance. Cheese was another common and precious leftover. A hard, dry, and salty cheese was a staple of the medieval diet. A small leftover heel of cheese was a treasure. It was packed with calories, with fat, and with salt. A guard on the wall, in the middle of his long, cold watch, might pull a small piece of cheese from his pouch. He will not eat it all at once. He will nibble at it, letting the salty, savory flavor dissolve slowly in his mouth.
It is a small burst of flavor in a bland world, a small jolt of energy to help him fight off the cold and the drowsiness. The last light in the great hall is the faint, dull red glow of the embers, breathing softly under their blanket of gray ash. The great, noisy, and vibrant heart of the castle is now quiet. The air still smells of smoke and of old food, but the sounds are gone. There is only the low, mournful sound of the wind finding its way through a crack in the heavy wooden shutters that now cover the high, arched windows. But the hall is not empty. In the shadows, against the walls, on the newly cleared floor, new figures are settling down for the night. These are the lower-ranking servants, the soldiers with no other place to sleep. For them, the floor of the great hall, close to the residual warmth of the great hearth, is their bed. They will wrap themselves in their cloaks, and they will try to find a few hours of rest in the cold, dark, and rat-infested heart of the sleeping castle. The servants' corner. We have seen the great curtained bed of the Lord, a fortress of warmth and privacy. But where did the dozens or even hundreds of servants who made the castle function actually sleep? Their rest was not a private affair, and it was rarely a comfortable one. It was a public, communal, and often vertical experience, squeezed into the forgotten corners of the great stone machine. The great hall, as we have seen, was the primary dormitory for many of the lower-ranking male servants and the men-at-arms. But even here, there was a hierarchy. The best spots, near the embers of the fire, were taken by the more important members of the household. For the lowest of the low, the stable boys, the scullions, the gong farmers, their sleeping place was at the very bottom of the social and the physical ladder. They would be in the coldest, draftiest part of the hall, near the great shuttered doors. Or they might not be in the hall at all. Imagine you are a young page, a boy in the service of one of the Lord's knights. Your master sleeps in a small private chamber, or perhaps on a pallet in the great hall. But you do not sleep beside him. Your place is at the foot of his bed, or more likely, just outside the door of his chamber in the cold stone corridor. You are a living alarm bell, a human guard dog. You sleep with one ear open, ready to respond instantly to your master's call. Your bed is the hard stone floor. Your blanket is your own thin cloak. Or imagine you are a kitchen maid. After a long 16-hour day of work in the hot, smoky, and chaotic kitchens, you do not have a private room to retire to. You and the other kitchen staff will sleep where you work. You will find a small empty space on the floor of the kitchen, perhaps near the residual warmth of the great ovens. You will sleep amidst the smells of old food, of grease, and of the scuttling rats that are your constant nocturnal companions. The castle is a vertical world, and sleep is arranged vertically. The Lord and his family are at the top, in the highest, most secure chambers of the keep. The important retainers are on the floors below, and the servants are at the very bottom, in the cellars, in the kitchens, in the stables, or squeezed into the forgotten liminal spaces of the castle. A servant's bed might be a simple straw-stuffed pallet tucked under a staircase. It might be a narrow wooden bunk in a crowded, unventilated attic space. It might be a simple pile of hay in the corner of a stable, shared with the horses in the smell of their manure.
There is no privacy. You sleep in a communal space surrounded by the sounds and the smells of your fellow servants. You have no personal space, no place to keep your few meager possessions. And your sleep is not your own. It is always conditional, always subject to the needs of your masters. The bell might ring in the middle of the night, signaling an attack,
and you will be expected to be awake and at your post in an instant. The lady of the castle might wake with the thirst, and a servant will have to be roused from their sleep to bring her a cup of water. The sleep of the servant is a shallow, fragile, and deeply insecure thing. It is a brief and often inadequate pause in a life of constant, unceasing labor and obligation. It is a stark reminder that in the rigid, hierarchical world of the medieval castle, the comfort of the few was built directly upon the discomfort and the exhaustion of the many. The locking of chambers. You have climbed the last of the narrow, spiraling steps. You have arrived at the upper floor of the keep. This is where the private chambers of the lord and his family are located: the solar, the wardrobe, and the bedchamber itself. This is the most secure, most private, and most intimate space in the entire castle, and now it must be sealed for the night. The door to the chamber is not a light internal door. It is a heavy, formidable barrier of thick oak planks reinforced with iron straps and studs. It is a door that is designed to withstand the blow of an axe. The process of locking this door is a nightly ritual, an act of profound and symbolic importance. First, the heavy door is pushed shut. It closes with a deep, echoing boom that reverberates through the stone chamber. Then, the real work begins. There might be a large iron lock, for which the lord or his chamberlain has the key. The key itself is a heavy, intricate piece of ironwork. The sound of it turning in the lock is a loud, grinding, and satisfyingly final sound. Clank, clunk. But the primary method of securing the door is the drawbar. This is the same system used on the main gate, but on a smaller scale. A massive horizontal beam of wood is slid from a deep hole in the stone wall across the back of the door and into a corresponding bracket on the other side. This great bar of oak turns the door into an immovable part of the wall itself. With the door now barred, a final sense of security descends upon the chamber. The family is now sealed within their own personal fortress, a box of stone and oak, deep in the heart of the larger fortress of the castle. They are as safe as it is possible for a person to be in the medieval world.
They are here for the feast. The rush-covered floor is a smorgasbord of discarded food, scraps of meat, pieces of bread, pools of spilled ale. The rats are the castle's unofficial and highly efficient cleaning crew. For the people sleeping on the floor, the presence of the rats is a constant and deeply unpleasant reality. You would be woken in the night by the feeling of a small, furry body scurrying over your legs. You would have to guard your own pathetic stash of leftover bread for fear that the rats would get to it before you did. The rats were not just a nuisance, they were a threat. They could bite, and their bite could become infected. And they were the carriers of the fleas that spread the most dreaded of all medieval diseases, the plague. And then there were the insects. The warm, filthy, and organic mat of the rushes on the floor was a perfect breeding ground for fleas. The straw-stuffed mattresses of the beds were infested with them. The bodies of the people, who bathed infrequently, were home to lice. The night was a time of constant, low-level torment from the bites and the itching of these tiny parasitic companions.
The kitchens and the larders were in a state of constant siege. The cooks would have to be endlessly inventive to try and protect the food from the mice, the rats, and the cockroaches. Food was stored in earthenware pots with heavy lids, or hung from the rafters in sacks. But the vermin were persistent, and a great deal of food was always lost to them. Even the lord in his great curtained bed was not entirely safe. A mouse could find its way up into the canopy. The fine woolen tapestries on the walls were a tempting home for moths and for beetles. This constant, unseen, and often unheard battle against the vermin was a fundamental part of life in the castle. It was a battle that was almost always lost. The vermin were a part of the ecosystem of the castle, a permanent and deeply unwelcome part of the household. Their silent, nocturnal activity was a constant, itchy, and unsettling reminder that the human inhabitants of the castle were never, ever truly alone. Dreams of feasts. The Lord lies in his great curtained bed. The servant lies on a pile of straw in the corner of the stable. The soldier lies on the floor of the great hall. They are all finally asleep. And in the strange, democratic, and lawless world of the dream, they are all haunted by the same powerful and often agonizing vision. They are haunted by the dream of the feast. We have seen how the winter was a time of constant, low-level hunger, even for the relatively well-fed inhabitants of the castle. The diet was monotonous, the fresh food was scarce, and the gnawing ache of an unsatisfied appetite was a common experience for everyone, from the lowest to the highest. And the mind, in its sleep, tried to correct this miserable reality. Imagine the dream. It is a dream of pure, unadulterated, and impossible abundance. You are in the great hall, but it is transformed. The smoky, dark room of winter is now a bright, sunlit paradise. The trestle tables are groaning under the weight of a magnificent feast. There are whole, roasted pigs, their skin crisp and crackling. There are peacocks redressed in their own iridescent feathers. There are great steaming meat pies, their crusts golden and flaky. There are silver platters piled high with fish from the sea. There are bowls of fresh, green salads and mountains of ripe, sweet fruit. Foods that are an impossible fantasy in the dead of winter. The air is filled not with the smell of smoke and damp rushes, but with the rich, warm, and intoxicating aroma of 1,000 delicious things.
In the dream, you are not just a spectator. You are a participant. You can eat as much as you want. There are no rules, no rations, no watchful overseers. The bread is white and soft. The ale is strong and sweet. The meat is tender and juicy. The hunger that has been your constant companion is, for a few, blissful and magical moments completely and utterly vanquished. This dream is a form of wish fulfillment, a simple, primal, and deeply human fantasy. It is the mind's attempt to provide the nourishment that the body is being denied. But the dream of the feast is not always a happy one. It can also be a source of torment. The food is there, but you cannot quite reach it. The cup of wine is just beyond your grasp. You are about to take a bite of the roasted pig, and then you wake up.
You wake up to the cold, to the dark, to the reality of your own aching, empty stomach. The beautiful, vibrant, and satisfying world of the dream evaporates, leaving behind only the bitter taste of its absence. The memory of the phantom feast only serves to make the reality of the morning's gruel or the stale black bread even more miserable. The dream of the feast is a testament to the power of food, not just as a source of physical sustenance, but as a source of psychological comfort, of joy, and of hope. To be well fed is to feel safe, to feel prosperous, to feel that the world is a generous and a benevolent place. To be hungry is to feel that the world is a harsh, mean, and unforgiving one. The dreams of the castle's inhabitants, filled with these visions of impossible plenty, are a poignant and a powerful expression of their deepest and most fundamental desire. It is a desire that is more profound than the desire for wealth or for power or even for safety. It is the simple, human, and eternally recurring dream of having enough to eat.
Part 5. The Long Hours Before Dawn. Whispers of Ghosts. The night in the castle is at its deepest, its darkest, and its quietest. The hours between midnight and the first faint hint of dawn are a time when the physical world seems to recede, and the boundaries with the world of the supernatural become thin and porous. This is the time when the castle is haunted not just by the living fears of attack and of hunger, but by the whispering, restless, and often malevolent spirits of the dead. The medieval world was a world that was crowded with ghosts. The belief in ghosts was not a fringe superstition. It was a mainstream and deeply held part of the Christian worldview. The souls of the dead, it was believed, did not always go directly to their final reward in heaven or their punishment in hell. Many were trapped in a state of purgatory, a place of temporary punishment where their sins were burned away. And sometimes these restless souls were allowed to return to the world of the living, to haunt the places they had known, to seek the prayers of their relatives, or to warn of a coming doom. The castle, with its great age, its dark stone corridors, and its long, often violent history, was the perfect landscape for a ghost story. Every castle had its resident spirits. Imagine you are a young guard on your first lonely watch on the high battlements. The moon is hidden behind a thick bank of clouds. The only sound is the low, mournful sigh of the wind. And you were thinking of the stories the older guards told you by the fire. They told you of the ghost of the White Lady, the spirit of a noblewoman who was starved to death in one of the high towers by her cruel husband. They say that on the coldest nights you can still hear her faint, weeping cries on the wind. They told you of the ghosts of the old lord, the current lord's father, a great and famously brutal warrior. They say that on the anniversary of his most famous battle, he can be seen walking the ramparts, a great, spectral figure in his rusty, clanking armor, his eyes glowing with a cold, green fire. They told you of the ghosts of the forgotten prisoners who rotted away in the dungeons below. They say that you can sometimes hear the faint ghostly and clanking sound of their chains echoing up from the very stones of the castle. These stories are more than just entertainment. They are a way of making sense of the strange and often frightening sounds and sensations of the castle at night. The sudden, unexplained draft that makes a torch flicker, it is the passing of a spirit. The strange creaking sound from an empty room, it is the footstep of a ghost. The sad moaning sound of the wind, it is the cry of a lost soul. The belief in ghosts is a way of populating the vast, empty darkness of the night with a narrative, with a personality. But it is a narrative that is also a source of profound and constant fear. To be alone in a dark corridor is to feel that you are not truly alone. To be on watch is to feel that you are being watched, not just by the living enemy, but by the dead. The fear of ghosts was a real and a powerful force in the medieval mind. It was a fear that could make a strong soldier's heart pound with terror and could keep a child awake and shivering under their thin blanket all night. The castle at night is a place where the past is not dead. It is a place where the dead are not past. They are a constant, whispering, and unsettling presence.
a reminder that the world is a far more mysterious and a far more crowded place than it appears to be in the simple, rational light of the day. Next are the knights and the important guests, their long trestle tables arranged as close to the hearth as possible. They too can feel the direct warmth of the flames. But as you move further down the hall, further away from the fire, the world gets colder. The lower-ranking members of the household, the soldiers, the servants, sit at tables that are in the colder, draftier parts of the hall. They are in the penumbra of the fire's warmth, able to see its cheerful light, but to feel very little of its physical heat. And at the very bottom of this thermal hierarchy are the people who are not at the tables at all, the humble servants, the kitchen boys, the dog handlers. They shiver in the deep shadows at the far end of the hall near the great drafty main doors. For them, the fire is a distant, taunting symbol of a comfort they can see but cannot share. The great hearth is also the hall's only source of significant light. The torches and the candles on the walls provide only a dim, flickering, and local illumination. It is the fire that fills the vast, smoky space with a warm, living, and orange glow. It is a light that is constantly moving, that makes the shadows leap and dance. A light that is perfect for storytelling, for creating an atmosphere of mystery and of magic.
His cry is a loud, clear, and powerful sound, a human voice projected with all the strength of his lungs. It is a sound that is designed to carry across the entire castle, from the outer walls to the inner keep. 3 of the clock, and all is well. The words are simple, but they are full of meaning. They are, first and foremost, a practical announcement of the time. They are a way of structuring the long, formless night, of breaking it down into manageable 1-hour increments. For the other guards on the walls, for the lord sleeping in his chamber, for the servant dozing in the hall, the cry is a subconscious marker of their progress through the darkness. But the words, "all is well," are the most important part of the cry. They are a constant, hourly reassurance. They are a verbal confirmation that the watch has been kept, that the perimeter is secure, that there are no signs of fire or of attack. It is a message of safety, a vocal lullaby for the entire anxious castle.
The cry of the watchman is a lonely sound. It is a single human voice set against the immense, inhuman silence of the night. It is a statement of defiance, a proclamation that even in the deepest, darkest hour, humanity is still awake, still vigilant, still in control. It is also a sound of profound monotony, the same cry, repeated hour after hour, night after night. It is the rhythmic, predictable heartbeat of the castle's security. Its very boredom is its greatest comfort. A night when the watchman's cry is the only sound you hear is a good night. It is a peaceful night. It is a night when you have survived. As you lie in your own deep and uninterrupted silence, imagine you can hear that faint, distant, and lonely voice calling out from a high stone tower in a world that is 500 years in the past. 4 of the clock, and all is well. Let that simple, ancient, and profoundly reassuring message be a final, comforting whisper, a sound that tells you that you are safe, that you are protected, and that it is all right to let go and to sleep. The lady's chamber. Let us now return to the most private and the most luxurious of all the castle's spaces, the bedchamber of the lord and his lady. We have seen how it is locked and barred, a fortress within the fortress. We have seen the great curtained bed, a sanctuary of relative warmth and comfort. But even here, in this place of ultimate security, the night is not a time of easy or of untroubled rest. For the lady of the castle, the night is a time of a unique and a particular kind of anxiety. While her husband's fears might be of battle, of betrayal, of the great public dangers of the world, her fears are often more intimate, more domestic, and no less terrifying. Imagine the lady of the castle lying awake in the deep of the night. Her husband is asleep beside her, his breathing a deep and heavy rhythm, but she is listening. She is listening to the sounds of the castle. She is a lighter sleeper than her husband. Her ear is attuned to the subtle shifts in the atmosphere of her home. She hears the creak of a floorboard in the corridor outside. Is it the guard on his patrol, or is it something else? She hears the distant, frantic barking of a dog in the courtyard. What has disturbed it? She is the sensory organ of the sleeping household, her mind always on a low and constant alert.
She is also listening for the sounds of her children. Her children do not sleep in their own separate bedrooms down the hall. They sleep in the same chamber as their parents. The younger children might be in a small wooden cradle at the foot of the great bed. The older ones might be on a smaller truckle bed that is stored under the main bed during the day. The lady's ear is tuned with a mother's instinct to the sound of her children's breathing. She is listening for the first faint whimper that signals a hungry infant. She is listening for the dry, rasping cough that could be the first sign of a deadly winter sickness. Her sleep is not a single unbroken journey. It is a fragmented and often interrupted series of short rests, punctuated by the needs of her children. And she is a person of deep and often fearful piety. The night is the time of the devil, the time of demons, the time when evil spirits are at their most powerful. As she lies in the darkness, her mind might be filled with the terrifying images she has seen in the church, in the paintings of the Last Judgment, of the torments of the damned.
Her primary defense against these spiritual dangers is prayer. In her hand, she clutches her rosary, a string of beads made of wood, of bone, or even of precious amber or coral. In the darkness, her fingers move over the smooth, familiar beads, one by one. With each bead, she whispers a silent, repetitive prayer, an Ave Maria, a Pater Noster. This is not just an act of piety. It is a powerful form of meditation. The repetitive movement of her fingers, the familiar rhythmic cadence of the silent prayer, all of it serves to calm her anxious mind. The rosary is a spiritual anchor in the dark and often frightening ocean of the night. It is a way of focusing her thoughts, of holding the fear at bay, of placing herself and her family under the protection of a higher and more benevolent power. The lady of the castle, for all her wealth and her privilege, is still a prisoner of the same fundamental fears that haunt every other inhabitant of the fortress. Her chamber may be warmer, her bed may be softer, but her night is also a long and often sleepless vigil. The shadows of the courtyard. Let us now imagine ourselves in the great open space of the castle's main courtyard, the outer bailey, in the dead of night. We have seen this space during the day, a bustling center of activity, but at night it is transformed into a world of deep, stark, and often deceptive shadows. The only source of light is the moon, if it is not hidden by the clouds. The moonlight in the medieval world was a much more powerful and a more important presence than it is in our own light-polluted age. On a clear, full moon night, the courtyard would be bathed in a cold, brilliant, and silver light. But this light is not a uniform, clarifying light. It is a light that creates contrasts. The open spaces of the courtyard are brightly lit, but the areas at the base of the great stone walls, the spaces under the eaves of the wooden buildings, the dark arched doorways of the stables and the workshops, these are plunged into a deep, absolute, and impenetrable blackness. The courtyard at night is a checkerboard of brilliant light and of profound shadow. And for the guard on the wall, or for the servant who must make a quick, nervous journey across the yard to the latrines, this world of shadows is a place of high anxiety. The human mind is a pattern-seeking machine, and in the partial, deceptive light of the moon, it will see patterns. It will see shapes where there are none. A simple pile of barrels, half hidden in the shadow of a wall, can take on the shape of a crouching man. The gentle, rustling movement of a bush in the wind can look for a terrifying moment like a figure creeping along the edge of the darkness. The familiar, everyday objects of the courtyard are transformed by the moonlight into a landscape of monsters. Every shadow is a potential threat. It could be hiding a thief who has somehow managed to get over the walls. It could be hiding an assassin creeping towards the keep. It could be hiding a wolf or a rabid dog. Or it could be hiding something even worse. It could be hiding a ghost, a goblin, a demon, one of the supernatural beings that were believed to own the night. To cross the courtyard at night is to make a journey across a dangerous and a contested territory. You do not stroll, you run. You move quickly through the open, moonlit spaces, and you hold your breath as you pass the deep, dark pools of shadow. Your heart pounding, your eyes straining to see what might be lurking there.
The sounds of the courtyard at night are also a source of fear. The hoot of an owl from the top of the gatehouse can sound for a moment like a human cry. The scuttling of a rat in a pile of refuse can sound like a stealthy footstep. The wind moaning through a crack in a wooden shutter can sound like the whisper of a ghostly voice. The moonlit courtyard is a place of profound and unsettling beauty, but it is a beauty that is laced with a deep and a primal fear. It is a world where the senses cannot be trusted, where the familiar becomes strange, and where every shadow holds the potential for a threat, either real or imagined. It is a perfect physical manifestation of the medieval mind itself, a small, brightly lit island of faith and of order, surrounded by a vast and a terrifying ocean of darkness and of the unknown. The gray of dawn. The watchman on the highest tower has made his final weary cry of the night. The stars in the western sky are beginning to fade, and in the east a subtle and a miraculous transformation is beginning to take place. The deep, absolute black of the night is giving way to a soft and a profoundly welcome shade of gray. The dawn is coming. For the inhabitants of the medieval castle, the first light of dawn is not the gentle, arousing call that it is for us. It is a reprieve. It is a pardon. It is the end of a long, cold, and anxious siege. Imagine the feeling, lying in your cold bed, whether it is the great curtained bed of the Lord or the simple straw pallet of the servant. You see that first faint gray light filtering through a high window or a crack in the shutters, and a feeling of immense and almost overwhelming relief washes over you. You have made it. You have survived another night. The dawn is a slow and a gradual process. First comes the gray. Then the gray lightens to a pale and
pearly white. And then the first low rays of the rising sun strike the highest towers of the castle, turning the cold gray stone into a warm and a hopeful shade of pink and of gold. This first light is a signal for the castle to begin to wake up, to unseal itself, to rejoin the world of the living. The first sound is the slow, rhythmic peal of a bell from the chapel. It is the bell from Matins, the first prayer service of the day. It is a sound that is not jarring and alarming like the midnight bell, but is steady, peaceful, and full of a quiet and a solemn hope. And then the great ritual of the shutting of the gates is performed in reverse. You hear the loud, scraping sound of the great oaken drawbar being lifted from its brackets. You hear the groan of the heavy wooden doors being pulled open. And you hear the loud, clanking, and triumphant sound of the portcullis being slowly winched back up into the gatehouse. The castle is open for business. The world is once again connected. A wave of fresh, cold morning air flows into the stale and smoky atmosphere of the great hall. The servants begin the work of rekindling the fire, of sweeping the rushes, of setting up the tables for the morning meal. The villagers, who have spent the night huddled in their huts outside the walls, can now bring their livestock back into the castle's outer bailey for protection during the day.
The dawn does not bring instant warmth or instant comfort. The morning is still bitterly cold. The first meal is still the same meager pottage. The day ahead is still one of hard and of monotonous labor. But the dawn brings light, and the light brings an end to the particular fears of the night. The ghosts and the demons have retreated with the darkness. The shadows in the courtyard have resolved themselves back into barrels and bushes. The world is once again a solid, a rational, and a less terrifying place. The dawn is a victory. It is a quiet and a daily triumph of order over chaos, of light over darkness, of life over the ever-present and a very real possibility of death. Each sunrise is a small and a hard-won miracle. As you lie in your own bed, in the deep and a peaceful comfort of your own modern night, let this final image of the medieval dawn be of comfort. It is a symbol of resilience, of endurance, and of the unwavering and a deeply human faith in the simple and a glorious promise that, after even the longest, the darkest, and the most dangerous of nights, the sun will always and inevitably rise again.